Shalom to everybody. Shalom to my mother. I see my mother is here. And we are continuing in our series of a deeper look into the month of Tishrei. And last time we spoke about Malchiyot, the idea of crowning God as king. We spoke about that Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of free will. And so that God, starting from the sixth day of creation, Aleph Tishrei, he can now be a king because until then he was a dictator. And that explains, we spoke about Shema Yisrael, and we spoke about the mitzvah of belief in God to get others to believe. Today, we're going to talk about the shofar and the code of the shofar. Rav Sadia Gaon writes in a famous article that there are 10 reasons or symbols why we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The most famous ones are Hariu Lifnei Amelech Hashem, that you blow trumpets before the king enters. Others say to remind us of Akedat Yitzchak and the ram's horn. Others say is the shofar of redemption, of Kibbutz Galuyot. But those are very famous things that we probably all learned in elementary school. What we're going to do today is to go a little deeper, a little inwards, and that is what is the code of the shofar. And I know most people in life have certain memories of ironic timing. I'll never forget in I think it was third grade in when I went to SAR Academy when we had like a model Seder before Rosh Hashanah. And just as we opened the door for Eliyahu Hanavi, Mrs. Ratner, the secretary, came in, and that ironic timing no one will forget. Another ironic timing that I remember is that right after the Bal Tokea, the person who blows the shofar made the bracha, even before he blew the first blowing, an ambulance passed by with its siren on, and it was pretty ironic. And as we're going to see, that the siren of an ambulance is directly connected with the code of the shofar. So let's get right into it, into the sources. Here we go. Share screen. Here we go. Blown away. The shofar is the soundtrack of the soul and Rosh Hashanah. We know in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, source number 1, that is the seventh month, the first day of the seventh month, counting from Nisan, so it's Rosh Hashanah. Mikra Kodesh Yelechem, it is a holiday, and we'll talk about what kind of holiday it is. You're not allowed to do any kind of milacha, a creative work, just like on Yom Tov. Yom Teruah Yeh Lechem. When the Torah describes Rosh Hashanah, the classic description is that it is the day of the Teruah. Now we know that there are really two types of blowing. There is the Tkiah and there is the Teruah. Their Teruah is like the way somebody cries, and there's a machloket in the Gemara, different opinions, whether we cry like a shvarim, like a whimper, or others cry like a Teruah. And having 7 children, I know that some cry like this and some cry like that, and that is why we do both shvarim and Teruah. But it really, both of them are called a Teruah. Teruah is the crying sound. And notice, Rosh Hashanah is not called Yom Tkiyah because, just like we all remember, every set of the shofar is constructed of a Tkiyah, a Teruah, and then another Tkiyah. And just like a sandwich, everybody knows a peanut butter sandwich is called peanut butter sandwich because you go after what's in the middle. And a salami sandwich has salami in the middle. So Teruah is sandwiched in the middle between the first and the last Tkiyah. And that apparently is why Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah. And we're going to focus on that, but we'll also focus on the Tkiyah. And let's go on. In source number 2, we see how the shofar was used in the olden days. The Navi Chezkel, that's Ezekiel chapter 33. Vayhidvar Hashem Elai Lemor, Ben Adam, God addresses the prophet, Daber b'nei amcha, speak to the people of your nation of Israel, Ve'amarta alehem eretz ki avia alea acherev, that it is a mashal, it is a parable, that when a war breaks out, or there is a threat of a war, and enemies might come with weapons on your city, and people take a person, and they appoint him as the scout. Today in modern Hebrew, the word is shomer, right? When you come into a yeshuv or you pass a army checkpoint, there's a custom to say shmira ne'ima, have a pleasant guard duty. The word sofet, more exactly, is a scout, but here in this context, as we'll see, it's also used for guard. Because what is the job of a scout or a guard who's on guard duty? V'ra'at acherev ba ala aretz, v'taka b'shofar v'hizhir et ha'am. If a person is on shmira, obviously, if he sees chas v'shalom, a terrorist coming, you gotta, follow the orders, fire in the air, warn him, fire at his legs, fire at him. But if you don't see a terrorist coming, or you see somebody far away, and it's a suspected terrorist, what you do is you sound the shofar. Now, the shofar is very clearly what we call in modern English the siren. And that is exactly what the tkiya and the truah are going to symbolize. Because when you have a siren, we know that there are two types of siren. There is, we just had last week, the year programs of those who were coming to Israel for a year to Midrashar Yeshiva were greeted, some of them on the first day, with a siren, with the Houthis from Yemen sent a missile. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, we got them back, that their prime minister was erased. Some say maybe also the minister of defense and also the Ramatkal, the chief of staff, but we don't know exactly yet. But how does the siren sound? The classic international siren is ups and downs. And that is what is called a teruah. The up and down sound, as opposed to the all's clear sound, that is a tkiya. When everything is clear, those who remember today, it's a little different because a lot of people, they just get nervous even if they hear the all's clear sound. But during the Gulf War in 1991, some of you may have been in Israel. So because the threat was not of conventional missiles, the threat was of poisonous gas, if you remember that. And Saddam Hussein was threatening to send poisonous gas on Israel if America invades Iraq. Who invaded Kuwait? For those of you who remember the story. And what did we have to do with it? Nothing, but Israel always has to be in the middle of everything. And B'Kitzur, Israelis and all tourists and all, even those who had just come for the year, were all walking around with gas masks. And the orders were that if you hear the siren, you go into a sealed room, put on the gas mask, seal the windows with sellotape. Most people had a prepared sealed room. Put a wet rag by the opening of the door. And the idea is that when you hear danger, that up and down siren, that is like the truah. That is what we see in Yechezkel, what the shomer blows when he sees danger. And then, how do you know when to leave the sealed room? So the sign was after 10 minutes, or if we know beforehand, they sounded a all's clear sign. That is the tkiya. The word tkiya comes from the word takua. It is something stationary. Like you say in Hebrew, a nail is takua, is nailed into a wall. Tkiya is something which is stationary, as opposed to truah, which is from the shorish, from the root, ra'ua. It is shaky. And as we're going to see, that is the beginning of the code of the shofar. But just remember, the most important word that we've said until now is shofar equals siren. The shofar is the siren. And somebody who didn't understand that really never understood what the shofar is about. Because in the olden days, when the Tanakh was given, when the Torah was given, that was the equivalent of a shofar, is what we today call a siren. Okay? Now let's look in source number 3, and we'll see that there are these exact two types of siren, what we call the tkiya and the trua. Okay, so let's see it inside. Source number 3. This is in Bamidbar Yud, chapter 10. Happens to be my bar mitzvah parsha. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem told Moshe, I want you to set up, make 2 silver horns. And as we're going to see, these horns, in some cases, we're told to blow a tkiya. In other cases, they were told to blow a truah. By the way, there's an interesting Gemara in Masechet Menachot. Rav Kook has a beautiful, beautiful explanation of the Gemara. The Gemara here says on the pasuk, "Aseh lecha shtei chatzotzrot kesef." You shall make for yourself 2 silver horns. And the Talmud asks, 1,800 years ago, 1,700 years ago, why does it say, make for you 2 horns? Why doesn't it say, make for you the altar, make for you the menorah? Davka, the only kli in the Beit HaMikdash, which says that you should make it for yourself, is regarding the horns. The Gemara Masechet Menachot explains, Aseh lecha, that the horns have to be for you and your generation. And Moshe Rabbeinu, after he made horns in the Mishkan, in the desert, Yehoshua, Joshua, could not use the same horns that Moshe Rabbeinu did. Every generation needs to make its own horns. David HaMelech made his own horn, and his son Shlomo Solomon made his own horn. Rav Kook asks, why does every generation need to make its own horn? And Rav Kook explained beautifully that when it comes to listening, every generation needs to be spoken to or needs to be alerted in the context of the blowing of the shofar in a different way. It may be that the Rambam, if he were alive today, he would know what to do with us and we would not know what to do with him. And that is why El HaShofet Asher Yeh B'Yamim Hahem, we were read in last week's parsha about judges. Every judge is fitting, is suitable to his generation. So Rav Kook explains beautifully that shofarot, that the chatzotzrot, have to be made anew in every generation, because every generation hears different things. So, sorry, can you repost your source sheets when you have a chance? We will, Bezrat Hashem. Let's go back to the share screen. Here we go. So we're back in source number 3. That's just why it says make for yourself horns, 2 different silver horns. Miksha ta'aseh otam, they have to be made out of one piece. You can't chisel them. Vayulecha lemikra ha'eda ulemasa et ha'machanot. The Torah already tells us from the beginning that the main blowing, and as we'll see, this is the same thing with the shofar, is for 2 events. Now, these 2 events can be broken down into a lot of other events, but the general topic is there are 2 types of blowing. Number 1, limikra ha'eda, to gather the people together. As we'll see, that is a tkiya. Or the second type is limasa et machanot, to travel. When the camp of Israel needs to travel, remember they traveled 40 times in the desert over 40 years. Less. It was, what was it, 22 travels over 40 years. Whenever we needed to travel, they blew a truah. And here comes the details, that it's not just for traveling, and it's not just for gathering the people. Pasuk Gimel. V'taku bahen, and they blew the chatzotzrot, the horns. V'noadu elecha kol eda el petach ohel moed. When you heard a tkiyah, that one long note, the idea was to gather the people around the Mishkan. The idea of gathering, unifying the people together, that is the symbol of the tkiyah. The tkiyah in the wilderness, in the desert, was to gather the people. That is a tkiyah. Pasuk Dalid. Ve'im ba'achat yitkau, if you blow one tkiyah, one of the horns, v'noadu elecha nasim rashei alfei Yisrael, then you know it is not to gather all of the nation, but it is to gather just the princes, the heads of each nation. In other words, very simple, tkiyah equals gathering, unite the people. And that's why it is one uniting sound. If it's one horn, it's to unite the leaders. If it's two horns, it's to unite all of the people. But it's very clear that the idea of tkiyah is to unite. Pasuk Hey. Ve'im ba'achat yitkau, v'noder asari, pasuk utkatem chua, v'nasu machanot hachonim hedma. And if we blow a teruah, notice the first stum shofar horn, if you hear a blowing, it is a tkiyah. You blow the shofar. You don't play a tune. You just blow the shofar. That's one note. But on the other hand, if you blow a teruah, the up and down sound, the crying sound in the desert, v'nasua machanot hachonim kedma, that was a sign for the eastern tribes to start moving. Utkatem truah shenit, if they blew another truah, that was a sign for the southern troops to go. Uva, and afterwards for the Aron, afterwards for the western troops, tribes, afterwards for the northern tribes. In short, truah equals traveling. Pasuk Zayin, and here is a central pasuk on our topic. Uva hakil et hakahal, but when you want to unite the people, titkeu velo tariu, do not blow a truah, because then you're just going to make everybody panic. Oh no, I got to pack up. We're going to see that also when there is a war, as we saw in Yechezkel, also Yirmiyahu. Whenever there's a war, you blow the truah, the warning sign, the alarm sign. But you don't want to alarm the people when you just want to gather them. So when gathering either the heads of the tribes or the people, you shall do a tkiyah and not a truah, because the two different types of blowing are totally different, as we're going to see. Pasuk Chet, Uvnei Aaron HaKohanim yitku b'chatzotzrot v'ayu lochem mechukat olam l'dorotechem. Who used to blow the horns in the Mishkan and in the Beit HaMikdash? It is the Kohanim. Pasuk Tet, V'chi tavo milchama ba'artzechem. If a war breaks out in your land, alatzarat soreretchem. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, Israel has been at war with 7 different enemies, and they really are giving us tzarat sorer tzaros. What do? Vareotem bechatzotzrot, you would sound a teruah, the up and down siren. V'nizkartem lifnei Hashem Elokechem v'noshatem mi'oivechem. And as we said, the teruah is a type of crying. Some whimper, that's like a shvarim. Some cry with a lot of sobbing, that's the teruah. But the idea is that some people cry, others don't cry. But when we are going out to war, we want to have a national way of crying, and that is blowing a truah. On the other hand, Pasuk Yud, here is another type of blowing. Pasuk Yud, V'yom simchatchem u'v'moadechem v'rochshei chadshechem. On your happy days, the Ibn Ezra says that if God gives you victory against your enemies, you shall declare a holiday. See Chanukah. See Yom Ha'atzmaut. See Yom Yerushalayim, the victory in the 6-day war. Okay? So when you are victorious over your enemies and you declare a holiday, or b'moadechem, your festivals, your regular Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the regular festivals, Rosh Chodesh also in the Beit HaMikdash, they would always blow the chatzotzrot. But what would they blow on these holidays? Utikatem, a tkiyah, b'chatzotzrot, alolotechem v'azivchei shalmechem. As you give the korbanot, the sacrifices, the Kohanim would blow the horns. Again, a tkiyah, not a trua. Vayulachem l'zikaron lifnei Hashem Elokechem, ani Hashem Elokechem. And Hashem would remember us. And that is, in short, the idea of the tkiyah and the trua. So we saw that Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Trua. That is a sandwich. Before and after each trua, there's a tkiyah, which we'll discuss. But first of all, let's focus on the trua. Trua, as we said, is blown when either traveling or during war. What is the common denominator between traveling and war? Well, let's look back at the ambulance. The ambulance, when it is driving, and just yesterday, I was driving in Yerushalayim 2 days ago, and an ambulance wanted to pass. The ambulance is not a tkiyah sound. The ambulance makes a trua, the up and down sound. Oh, why? Because the ambulance wants to tell people, you are in my way. And every driver has to ask himself, where am I and where should I be? That's the key of the trua. When you hear an ambulance, when you hear a trua on Rosh Hashanah, where am I? I may be blocking the ambulance. Where should I be? Move to the side. Similarly, I remember as a kid, the old Sha'onei Ma'orer, the old alarm clock. Toda. The old alarm clocks, they used to wind them up, and they would make a very boring sound where I'm a relatively heavy sleeper, and they would wake me up for maybe 2 seconds, and then I'd fall asleep again because it's a very boring sound. As a matter of fact, even today, when there is noise going on in the house with the children or today grandchildren, and it's too noisy to fall asleep, what do? I put on what's called white noise. I put on a noisy fan, and that fan, Davka, is very conducive to falling asleep. And that is why they invented the new modern alarm clocks. Today, alarm clocks, they all have truot. They all are up and down. Sometimes it's a tune, sometimes it's like a siren. But the idea is, where am I? I am in bed. Where should I be? I should be getting up. You'll see that is the idea of the alarm clock. That is the idea of the ambulance. That's the idea also, by the way, when in driver's ed. It's been a while since we learned how to drive, but they teach you that if somebody is walking, and it's dangerous, what do? I still remember my driver's ed teacher. He said, give a friendly taps on the horn. Do a trua, don't do a tkiyah. My brother-in-law, Danny Dorel, if anybody's looking for a good disc jockey or a drummer, he's been playing for decades as a drummer. And I remember it must be 25 years ago. My brother-in-law was coming back from a wedding. Anybody who comes early to a wedding knows that the drummer is the first one to come to a wedding because he has to set up his drums. And anybody who is the last one at the wedding, the drummer is the last one because he has to pack up his drums. Anyway, so my brother-in-law was coming back at 2 a.m. in the dark roads of Kochav HaShachar, the small settlement where I live, and there are no night lamps. There are no lights along the highway, so it's pretty dark. And as he's driving, there's nobody coming towards you at 2 a.m, so you drive with your high bright lights on, and all of a sudden he sees a chamor, a donkey, right in the middle of the road. And he sees the donkey's eyes, and the donkey is there, and he's looking at him. And my brother-in-law, Donnie, looks at the donkey, and he honks. And the donkey doesn't move. The donkey freezes. And I don't know if my mother remembers. Remember, Donnie ran into the donkey and had a total loss of the car. Thank God he was not hurt. But afterwards, he spoke. There's a guy who lives in Shiloh, is a driver instructor. So he asked the driver instructor, "What should I have done?" I honked the horn. I didn't have time to brake, right? There wasn't enough room to brake. The driver instructor said, "What should you have done?" In our words, you should have made a truah, not a tkiah. Because if you would make a truah, that up and down sounds, those taps on the horn, that would have gotten the chamor, the donkey, maybe to move. Because even a donkey, which I don't know what kind of IQ the donkey has, but he may ask himself, where am I? I'm in the middle of the road. And where should I be? Let me get out of the way, because the driver has no time to stop. That is the idea, again, of the truah. And again, it's the same thing with the ambulance. It's the same thing with a alarm clock, and it's the same thing when you drive the car. Now, why in the desert are we taught that when you travel and when there is a war, you do a truah and not a tkiyah? Well, I just explained. If you do a tkiyah, that could be a happy occasion. Holidays, we also do a tkiyah. That's the all clear sign in the siren. And in the olden days, before there were sirens, that is the opposite of the truah. The truah is to wake people up. And what happens when we're traveling? When you're traveling, especially in the desert, there are a lot of scorpions. There's danger of water, lack of food, like we see throughout the book of Bamidbar. And there are certain dangers in traveling. Car accidents, Khalila, plane accidents, Khalila. And that's why it's not a coincidence that traveling is a truah and war is a truah, because war is also danger. And in war, what do you have to do when you hear the up and down siren? Again, ask yourself, where am I and where should I be? I mentioned before the 1991 Gulf War, where the orders were not to go to the shelters. Today in Israel, if you hear a siren, you go to a shelter. But in 1991, the orders were not go to the shelter, go to your sealed room, because the threat was, as I said before, of poisonous gas. By the way, I don't know if people remember what convinced Saddam Hussein to put away the poisonous gas. It's interesting. I still remember. Anybody remember the deadline? It was January 15th, 1991, where President George Bush Sr. told Saddam Hussein that if he doesn't pull out of Kuwait by January 15th, America is going to invade and push Iraq out of Kuwait. To which Iraq threatened, no, if you attack us on January 15th, Iraq is going to attack Israel. Now, the problem is, as I said before, that Israeli intelligence knew that Saddam Hussein had the capability of poisonous warfare. What is a poisonous missile? There are three types of a missile. There is the warhead. There is the middle, which is the gun, fill of gunpowder. And the third part is the tail, which directs it. Now, the gunpowder is what makes it explode. What explodes? The head, the missile head. What is a classic missile head? It is metal, and it blows up into millions of splinters, metals, what's called shrapnel, and that's why it's so dangerous, right? It's like shooting a million bullets in one shot. But Germany in World War I invented poisonous gas, and Saddam Hussein copied the idea, where they had a hollow head of the missile. The head was hollow, and they filled it with poison gas. And that's what he was threatening to send on Israel on January 15th, 1991. And that's why all Israelis, we were all walking around with gas masks. What happened on January 14th, 1991? At the time, this was not publicized, but it was publicized afterwards. Yitzchak Shamir, who was a tough cookie, some of you remember him. He was the head of the Stern Gang before the state of Israel. Yitzchak Shamir was the prime minister, and he started taking out. He did. They saw in the Pentagon in Washington what was called suspicious movement in Dimona. Now, I'm not revealing any military secrets because the whole world knows that, at least according to, at least at one point, Israel's nuclear weapons were held in the sleepy, quiet town in the Negev called Dimona. And the Pentagon saw a suspicious movement that they had never seen before on January 14th, the day before the war was supposed to break out. George Bush Sr. gets on the red hotline to Yitzchak Shamir and says to him, Yitzchak, what's going on in Dimona? And Yitzchak Shamir says, well, tomorrow Saddam Hussein is threatening to attack us. To which George Bush says, but Dimona means nuclear war. Are you planning on turning this into nuclear war? To which Yitzchak Shamir answered that, Mr. President, if you do not want this to turn into World War III, do yourself a favor, do the world a favor, do Saddam Hussein a favor, and tell him through your diplomatic channels the day before the war that we in Israel know that he is thinking of sending poisonous gas missiles on Israel. Continued Yitzchak Shamir that 40 years before, in the 1940s, the Germans gassed Jews because we did not have the Jewish state, because we did not have the Jewish army, because we did not have Jewish nuclear bombs to deter our enemies. Let Saddam Hussein know that if he sends one poisonous gas missile on Tel Aviv, he is not going to have Baghdad. And like I said, Yitzchak Shamir was a tough cookie. And, a lot of people threaten and don't carry out their threats. Yitzchak Shamir, his threat was taken very seriously. And Saddam Hussein, in fact, he sent 39 missiles, but they were all conventional missiles. He did not dare send a poisonous missile onto Israel. Anyway, why do I mention that? During the Gulf War, the orders were, during those 39 missiles that fell, there was the air raid siren, and the orders were, again, what do you ask? Where am I and where should I be? I should go to my sealed room. Now, in a regular trua, in a regular war, in a conventional war, every person has to ask themselves, if you are a soldier and you hear a siren, then you have to run to your Yechidat Miluim, your Yamach. If you are not a soldier, but you have children, run to the park where they are playing and get them into a shelter. If you're at work, ask yourself, where is the closest shelter? If you're driving on the highway, where is the closest place to cover your head? But what is the common denominator whenever there is danger, again, in the midbar, in the desert, whether we were traveling or whether there is going to war? And today, again, that is the tzfira, that is the siren. Always ask yourself, where am I and where should I be? That's why Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah is the day that we ask ourselves, where am I and where should I be? And that is a good summary of what Yom Teruah is about. Now, why is Rosh Hashanah the day that we take stock of where am I and where should I be? That Teruah, a day of the siren. By the way, I have to mention the word in Hebrew for siren is tzfira. And I will never forget where I learned that word. In my first year in Israel, I was learning in yeshiva. And I heard that on Yom HaZikaron, Israeli Memorial Day, that they have all of these ceremonies in Yerushalayim. So I took a bus to Yerushalayim, and in the middle of the bus ride, the bus stops, pulls over to the side. Everybody, the entire bus stands up at attention. And as somebody who was just 3 months in Israel, I said, Makara, Makara, what happened? Why is everybody standing up? Somebody said, Keket, Sfira. Be quiet. There is the Sfira, the siren, to commemorate Yom HaZikaron. Now, I didn't know the word Sfira, so I thought that he said Sfirata Omer. And I said, wow, that's great. In a Jewish country, the buses pull over to the stop, and everybody stands up to count Sfirata Omer. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting for Sfirata Omer, and it never came. And that is when I learned the word Sfira. The Kitzur, Sfira is, and we'll talk about soon, why we have a siren on Yom HaZikaron and on Yom HaAtzmaut. We'll talk about that soon, but those are a tkiyah. We're talking now about a truah. What happens on Rosh Hashanah? And last week we discussed Rosh Hashanah, we remember that God is the king. He is the judge. What happens on a birthday? What happens on New Year's? Well, I know in America, New Year's people get drunk. But in Am Yisrael, New Year's is a day of taking stock, asking myself, where am I? How much have I grown since the last year? And where should I be? There was a best-selling book. Anybody remember Gail Sheehy? There was a best-selling book called Passages. Interesting. I saw in Wikipedia, that famous book is listed by Library of Congress as one of the 10 most influential books ever written. So I guess it must be pretty. But what is Passages? It talks about the different passages in life. Passages from childhood to being an adolescent, passagehood to being an adult, a passage to middle age, right? That's the most famous middle age crisis, where people ask themselves, where am I? And where do I want to be? Where should I be? Is this the wife that I wanted? Is this the husband that I wanted? Is this the job that I wanted? Right? That is middle age crisis. That is passage into a new stage of life. Or when you pass into retirement, the golden age, right? That is another pass. And what do you do when you pass into a new stage of life? You take stock and you ask yourself, where am I and where should I be? By the way, I remember a statistic. I like statistics in case you haven't noticed. In America, the day with the most suicides of the year is New Year's. Because what is New Year? Even in America, maybe that's why people want to get drunk, because they don't want to ask themselves, where am I and where should I be? They don't want to take stock of where I am now. How much have I grown in this past year? By the way, another type of personal passage, a personal Rosh Hashanah, is a birthday, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, why do we celebrate? What should a person do on his birthday? He should think about, how much have I grown? Where am I? Where do I want to be next year? Again, where am I and where should I be? Maybe the biggest passage is as a person prepares for death. If a person, Khalila, is chronically ill, it just came before the class, there was a funeral here on Kol Chava Shachar. And when you go to a funeral, that is a pretty big passage. And I know myself, I imagine a lot of people, when they go to a funeral and they see the corpse, they ask themselves, where am I? Am I making the most of life? Am I utilizing my life? Am I utilizing my time? What more do I want to do that I haven't done yet? So Rosh Hashanah is a national passage, is like a national birthday where everybody evaluates life. It's a time to ask yourself, you remember, to be or not to be. That is a question of passage. And Bekitzur, that is what's called Midat Hadin. Midat Hadin is the aspect of God as the judge of the world, as the king and judge, that we pass before him on Yom Truah, where we sound the Truah, we sound the siren, similar to the ambulance and the wake-up call and the honking of the car. Where am I and where should I be? That is the essence of Yom Truah. On the other hand, what is a Tkiyah? Remember, the Tkiyah, the Truah, is sandwiched in between two Tkiyahs. There is, yes, we call Rosh Hashanah the day of the Ra'uah, the shaking, Midat Adin, Avinu, God, Malkenu, God is our king. But before and after every Truah, we sound a Tkiyah. What is the Tkiyah we saw in the Midbar, in Bamidbar, in the desert? The Tkiyah is the all's clear sign. You can leave the sealed room. You can leave the shelter. That is a sign of security. And why do we sound the Tkiyah on Yom HaZikaron or on Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day? That is a day to unite. And that is the Tkiyah that was blown in the desert. That when Moshe wanted to unite the Nesiim, or wanted to unite all of the people, it says, Titka'u, lo tariu. Don't blow a truah. Don't alarm. Don't get everyone nervous. Don't think, oh no, we're about to travel. Oh no, there's a war break. No. Titka'u is the opposite. It's an all clear sign. And before and after every truah, we have that all clear sign. What is a truah, a tkiyah again? A tkiyah is there is safety in numbers. The idea of unifying, of gathering together in shul, of gathering together in the desert. I remember there are certain neighborhoods which were considered dangerous to go. There was during Yom Tov, I remember in Riverdale, there was a Johnson Avenue where the Catholics, they had regular school, and it was not that safe to pass by St. Gabriel's on Johnson Avenue. And so what was the solution? You walk in numbers. There is safety in numbers. The idea of gathering together on Yom HaZikaron, on Yom HaShoah, where we all unite and support each other, that is the idea of Tkiyah, that support group. That God is not just our judge, but he is also our father. He's not just Malkenu, but he's also Avinu. And remember that before and after every truah, before and after every alarm of where am I and where should I be, there is the all clear sign, even before the truah. Let's look in source number 4, where we foreshadowed a drop. For source number 4, where the Torah tells us in Bamidbar 31, Vayishlach otam Moshe elif lemata, when Am Yisrael is about to go to war against Midian, and the Chatzotzrot, the horns, Hatruah biado. The horns are then called the horns of Truah. Why horns of Truah? Because you're going to war. Because that is the word Ra'uah. It's shaky. It's danger. It is where am I and where should I be? On the other hand, Nithemya, all the way at the end of the Tanakh, in Nehemiah, Perek Tet, it tells about how Ezra and Nehemiah, at the beginning of Shivat Zion, when the Jewish people were returning to the land of Israel to build the second Beit HaMikdash, they celebrated Rosh Hashanah. How was that Rosh Hashanah? V'yasfu kol ha'am ki'ish echad. Everybody was gathered together, El Harechov, remember, Rosh Hashanah is also a day of gathering, of unity. It's security, not just truah. So everybody gathered al Rechov Asher Lifnei Shar HaMayim in Yerushalayim by the gate. V'yomru le'Ezra Sofer lavi et Sefer HaTorah, Torat Moshe, Asher tzila Hashem et Moshe. And Ezra brought the Sefer Torah out. Vayavi Ezra Kohen et HaTorah Lifnei HaKahal mi'ish va'ad isha. The whole men and women, everyone was there. V'chol mevin lishmoa b'yom echad lechodesh hashvi'i. Rosh Hashanah. The first day of the 7th month, that is Tishrei, that is when Ezra took out the Sefer Torah. Pasuk Chet. Vaikru b'Sefer Torah Elokim mefurash v'som seichel v'yavinu b'mikra. And when people heard the Torah, and they heard that you're not allowed to do melacha on Shabbat, and it says there in the book of Ezra that people were working on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to marry non-Jewish wives or spouses. And a lot of people had non-Jewish spouses. And people, you're not allowed to eat pork. And some people may have been eating pork. So everyone was hearing what the Torah was saying, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. Vayomer Nehemiah hu hatrashata, that's his nickname. Ve'ezra HaKohen HaSofer v'Aleviim HaMevinim et ha'am l'chol ha'am. And they announced to all the people, Hayom kadoshu l'Adonai Elohechem. Today is holy for God. What does that mean? Al tit'ablu. Do not mourn. Do not be worried. Va'al tivku. Don't cry. Ki bochim kol ha'am keshomam divrei Torah. Everybody was hearing all these things that they're doing wrong from Ezra HaSofer. And they thought it was Rosh Hashanah is just Yom Teruah. And Nehemiah is telling them, no, don't just cry. And it continues. Vayomer lehem lechu ichlu mashmanim. Go and eat fat meat. In those days, that was considered good. I don't know if a person's vegetarian, special tofu or whatever you enjoy. There is a mitzvah to celebrate and to be happy on Rosh Hashanah. It's not just a day of God judging us. Ushtu mamtakim, and drink sweet wine. V'shilchu manot le'ein nachono. Sound familiar? Purim. Purim is a sign that what does a Jew do? What does a proper Jew do when he's happy? He sends food to his poor neighbor, and we help each other out. Because Rosh Hashanah is a holiday. For people who don't have food, send them, make sure that they have food. Ki kadosh hayom la'adonenu. Right? We say this in davening on Rosh Hashanah. It is a day holy for God. Va'al te'atzvu. Do not be upset. Ki chedvat Adonai hi ma'uzchem. Because being happy with God, that is our strength. How can you be happy on Yom Teruah? The answer? Tkiya. Tkiya. Before and after Teruah, and that is what Ezra and Nehemiah are telling the people. It's not just a day of crying. V'Alevim machshim l'chol ha'am le'mor, and the Levim are telling everyone, Hasu, be quiet, stop crying. Ki hayom kadosh ve'al te'atzvu. You got to understand, this is the message of Rosh Hashanah. So what is Rosh Hashanah? Is it a happy day? Or is it a day of judgment? The answer, it is both. It is a day of Tkiya, and it is a day of Teruah. And that is what we say right before blowing both voices of the shofar. Source number 6. Remember this. It's a beautiful, beautiful explanation, what we're suggesting. Allah Elohim betruah, it says in Tehillim Mem Zayin, we say that the voice of Elohim goes up with a truah. What is Elohim? As opposed to Adonai bekol shofar. Here, Adonai is Yud Kei Vav Kei. This is the difference between truah and a regular shofar blast, which is a tkiyah. The truah goes together with Elokim. Elokim we know as Midat Hadin. That when God wants to remind us that he is the judge, he calls himself Elohim. Just as the Torah calls judges in the Sanhedrin. V'nikra balabayit ela Elohim. Judges are called Elohim. So yes, Rosh Hashanah is the day that God is judge, and that's why we blow a truah. On the other hand, Yud Kei Vav Kei B'Kol Shofar, it is also, what is Yud Kei Vav Kei? Midat HaRachamim. That is the other aspect of God, that God is our Father. He's also our Father and also our King. Also Tkiyah and also Truah. Also, where am I and where should I be? But also, don't worry. I give the example of now I could tell I mentioned my mother is here today participating. And the first time I remember in New York when you drive for that first I know in Israel, I think it was that way in America, you it, in Israel you need an adult to drive with you. In America, I think maybe it was the first half year you need an adult. I don't remember exactly. Anyway, I remember the first time I went out with our brown station wagon with my parents' permission, without my parents. Now I can tell the truth now that I'm in my 60s. Um, I put the pedal to the metal to see how fast and how how much I could go on the highway. That is what a teenager does the first time he is driving. Now imagine somebody is driving 120 kilometers an hour, 100 miles per hour on the highway, and he just got his license. And behind him, he sees a policeman, and the policeman puts on his siren, and it's a trua, it's not a tkiya. In other words, where am I and where should I be? Habibi, pull over to the side. Now, the new driver pulls over to the side. And I know in Israel, maybe in America also it was, I don't remember, that you're on probation for your first year. And if you're caught speeding or doing a serious violation during your first year of driving, they take away your license. Now, this guy who's speeding and the cop is coming out and he's trying to figure out, what do I do? I can't lie. Maybe I should lie. And he's really nervous, and all the driver's education, all those lessons, and all the money. And the cop is coming closer and closer. And then he notices that the policeman is his father. Hey, I forgot, my father is a policeman. Now, if there is any policeman in the world who might spank the perpetrator, it's your father. But if there is any policeman in the world who might not take away your license, it's also your father. Because, again, he probably paid for a lot of the driving lessons. If anybody has mercy on you, maybe it is your father. And that is a good example of how Hashem is also our father and also our king, also our judge. These are the tkiyot around every trua. Now, what we're going to do in the few minutes that we have left is to run through a lot of the customs and other laws of Rosh Hashanah. And we're going to see that Rosh Hashanah is both. It is both aspects. It is tikiyah. It is a holiday, like we saw in Nehemiah. On the other hand, it is also Yom Truah. It is a day of the siren. War. Get on the move. Where am I and where should I be? Passages. Let's look together quickly in source number 7, where the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, writes in the Shulchan Aruch, what do we do on Rosh Hashanah? Ochlim v'shotim usmechim. It's Yom Tov. You're not supposed to fast on Rosh Hashanah. You eat and you drink. Ve'ein mitanim b'Rosh Hashanah. You don't fast on Rosh Hashanah. V'lo b'Shabbat Shuvah. Even some people who fast during the 10 days of Tshuva don't fast on Shabbat Tshuva and don't fast on Rosh Hashanah because it is not a sad day. It is also a Tkiyah day, which is what we sounded in the desert and in the Beit HaMikdash on festivals. Omnam lo yochlu kol sva'am. Don't overeat. Leman lo yekelu rosham v'tiyah yirat Hashem al pneihem. Because remember, it's also Yom Truah. God is not just our Father, He is also our King, both aspects. So eat. And by the way, it's a mitzvah to eat on Rosh Hashanah. And it's a mitzvah to have a su'udah. And if you forget to say Ya'aleh v'yavo, you go back and you say Ya'aleh v'yavo because there's a mitzvah to eat bread on Rosh Hashanah because it's a holiday. On the other hand, it's not just a holiday. This is the duality. Source number 8, the Talmud Bavli, Daf 32b. Again, we don't have time to go through all of this. We're running out of time. It says, why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah? And the Gemara answers, well, how can we say Hallel when we are coming before God as the judge? Well, the fact that we ask, maybe we should say Hallel, is because of the two tkiyot. Yeah, it is a holiday. And it is the day that God is our Father. On the other hand, uh, don't overdo it. Hallel, that's too much. You can't say Hallel on a day that we're standing for God. Now, for those who know the Soloveitchik family, know that the Soloveitchik family makes a living on the Rambam and reading in between the lines of the Rambam. Ever watch inside and notice how the Rambam writes in between the lines. The Rambam in Ilchot Megillah, chapter 3, source number 9. He says, Aval Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippur ein bahem Hallel, like we just learned in source number 8. You don't say Hallel. You don't overdo it. It's not singing and dancing on Rosh Hashanah. Lefi she'en yemei tshuva, because it's also days of tshuva, of returning to God, v'yirah, v'pachad, and God is also our King. Lo yemei simcha yetera. How does the Rambam ingeniously put in both messages? He says Rosh Hashanah is not too much happiness. Yes, it is a day of happiness, tkiyot, but it don't overdo the happiness because it's also Yom Teruah. God is also our judge, not just our Father. Source 10, in the laws of Avelut, the Rambam writes, V'chein Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim, en divrei Avelut noheg behen. So most people, most of the participants know of a case that somebody, chas v'shalom, passes away right before Yom Tov. What do? The Chag, the holiday, stops the Shiva, even if it was just 1 day or 2 days, even if it was just 10 minutes. So what about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? If a person dies and is buried before Rosh Hashanah, does it stop the Shiva like a holiday? The answer is yes. Even 1 hour before Rosh Hashanah is just like a regular holiday. Why? And it stops the Shiva because that is one aspect of Rosh Hashanah. Source 11, the Rambam in Ilchot Tshuva. Watch this. Again, the Rambam is beautiful. Look how he puts his ideas in between the lines. Every year, when the holiday of Rosh Hashanah comes, we ask ourselves, where am I? Where should I be? But notice, what does the Rambam here throw in? Totally unnecessary. Well, the Rambam thinks it's necessary to remind us it is a Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah is called a Yom Tov. And that's why there's a source number 12 in the Rambam, Ilchot Shabbat. B'Rosh Hashanah omer v'titen lanu Hashem Elokeinu b'Ahava et Yom Tov mikra kodesh hazeh. Sound familiar? No, unless you're a Yemenite. Most of us do not say that Rosh Hashanah is Yom Tov mikra kodesh. But there, I could understand the Rambam because in this halacha is putting the stress on the Teruah, on our King, on Allah Elokim b'Teruah midat adin. Rabbeinu Asher, the Rosh, says, Rav Haigon says, Ein minag lomar chagim uzmanim l'sason. On Rosh Hashanah, you don't say chagim uzmanim l'sason because again, it's not totally happy. The same thing in source 14 regarding Vatiten lanu Hashem Elokeinu mo'adim l'simcha. Oh, well, that we say on a regular festival, but we do not say it on Rosh Hashanah. Again, it's the balance. Similarly, the duality in source 15, the Talmud Yerushalmi says that what happens on the Talmud Yerushalmi, what happens on Rosh Hashanah? We dress in white. Why? Because we know that our God, our Father, our God, our Judge is also our Father. Most people are shivering when they stand before the Judge, but we are God's children. And that's why we wear white. Ask the Bach in source number 16. Well, if it's such a holiday, so let us wear colorful clothing and expensive, fancy clothing. And again, the obvious answer is don't overdo it. Yes, Rosh Hashanah, God is Tkiyah. He is our Father before and after every Truah. Don't lose hope. On the other hand, it's also a serious day of Malkeinu. Maybe I'll just finish off with on our Yishuv. Again, today it's grown. We're almost 500 families, but it's something very interesting. No, maybe I'll finish off with a Hasidic story. There's a Hasidic story on the first night of Slichot. Sfardim started Rosh Chodesh, Ashkenazim the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah. And by the Hasidim, the custom is for the Rebbe to be Chazan during the slichot. And there was the Rebbe says slichot, but he felt that something was missing. And he gave a clap on the table, like, wake up, we got to get into it. And he says another paragraph of slichot, and still he feels that people are sleeping. So the Rebbe turns around in the way that only a Hasidic Rebbe can and will do in the middle of davening. And he says to the people, do you want God to answer our prayers? Everybody says yes. The Rebbe says, I want to reveal to you the secret name of God. Now we know, according to Chazal, there are 70 different names of God, but one is the most secret name that nobody mentions except for the Kohen Gadol in the Holy of Holies. And here the Rebbe is going to tell us everybody is on their seat, everybody is nervous. What is the secret name of God that promises that we will have all of our prayers accepted? The Rebbe says the secret name of God is Tati, Abele, Daddy. Remind God that He is our Father. Because your father, anybody who has children knows, a father melts when his child asks something. And that is, I mentioned our Yishuv. Friday nights on our Yishuv, about 450, 500 families, a lot of children. If one person, if there's always a child crying, remember that? 1,000 children, always going to be one crying. And what do they cry? Abba! And you see 450 heads turn around because maybe it's my child. Even if it's just 1 out of 450 chance, maybe it is my child. And that's what the Rebbe was telling his Hasidim, that if you turn to Hashem as our Father, not just our King, that is how our tefillot are accepted. To summarize, there's a duality of Rosh Hashanah. Yom Teruah is the day of the up and down siren. Kia is the all's clear siren. God is also our King, but He is also our Father. Allah Elokim betruah. God goes up with the truah to Midat Hadin, Elokim. Hashem Yud Kevavke Bekol Shofar, that is with a Tkiah. And we bless everyone that as we approach Rosh Hashanah, nobody could forget September 7th, that what happened. And nobody thought of Rosh Hashanah just 3 weeks beforehand, what might be waiting in store on Simchat Torah. And it's always good to remember that, yes, Rosh Hashanah is a very serious day. On the other hand, don't overdo it because it's also a holiday. Okay, any questions or comments?
What's with Shvarim?
Shvarim, we said at the very beginning, Shvarim is a truah. The Talmud says that there's Tkiah and Truah, just like we saw throughout the class, but there is a difference of opinion how you do a Truah. Is it a Shvarim type, like a sobbing, or is it a lot of small whimpers, like a Truah? But everyone agrees that a Shvarim is a type of Truah. Okay, let me just see the chat. If there's any, do I see chat here? Participants? Oh, I guess there was no chat. Well, maybe if there was chats, maybe say it out loud so that because I can't find the chat. Yeah, the floor is open for questions or comments.
Thank you. Excellent.
In Israel,
pleasure.
a major complaint amongst Israelis is so fair. I said, Allah, I had difficulty understanding what fair meant. Right?
Yeah, that's like my tzfira, my siren. Right.
Hashem, who's shofet tzedek, so His judgments are just. So therefore, we rejoice in His just judgments.
Right. That's also an important point. Yeah, fair. Okay. Any other comments? Does anybody see any chats? Oh, here I see chat. So sorry, can you repost? I'll ask Jay to repost, Rabbi Kelman to repost the source sheet. Is anyone losing sound? Not me. I was fading in and out. How many people had a problem? By a show of hands? Not too many problems. Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Safety and unity, so relevant today. Yafeh, very good. It says in Tilim, Yismechu HaShamayim Lifnei Hashem, Kiva Lishpot HaAretz, Yishpot Tevel B'Tzedek. Yismechu HaShamayim Lifnei Hashem, Kiva Lishpot HaAretz. Hashem is always also Yud Ke Vav Ke, Midat Adin, and also Midat HaRachamim. Sometimes it's explicit and sometimes less. Okay, thank you. I enjoy the way you balance the seriousness of the subject and the pleasant examples of how to behave. Okay, my pleasure. What about the Shvarim? We answered. Here's the source sheet. Somebody put up the source sheet. Do you all see it? In chat, for those who want to... That's good for those. I know there are some Torontonians here from Toronto. There's a Jewish school there named Chat, right? Okay. Oh, my pleasure. Okay, any other comments?
Yes, Rabbi, I just have one comment, Rav Shvat.
Sure.
It's just, I think it's a beautiful message to us for starting off the year on a day of, as you're presenting it, of moderation. And that really is what our lives should be like going forward. And not too extreme in any direction, but to, to combine both aspects of the, of the shofar into our lives as we go forward during the year.
Very nice. Ahavti, how they say in English, like.
Thank you. It's beautiful, beautiful share. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so we'll see you all next week, Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you.
And if anybody here is a family friend or wants to say hello, you can stay on for a minute or two to say hello. And
Rav Shvat, I'm going to give you regards from Shani Ruda, my sister.
Oh, Simaruda. I got it. Thank you so much. Okay, and to Nomi as well. Nomi's in Israel now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Vakasha. Okay, so we'll see everybody next week. Bezrat Hashem. Ima, you got to turn on your mic. Your mic still isn't on. You know what? Maybe I can turn on your mic from here. I don't know. I'll call you up. Okay.